Good afternoon, everyone. The meeting for Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure will now come to order. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Brown May.
Here.
Assemblyman Ellison.
Present.
Assemblyman Levitt.
Here.
Assemblyman Miller.
Present.
Assemblywoman Peters.
Here.
Assemblyman Roberts.
Here.
Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Here.
Assemblyman Watts.
Here.
Assemblyman Wheeler.
Here.
Assemblyman Yeager.
Here.
Chair Monroe Moreno.
And I am here. I'd like to welcome you to today's meeting for the Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure. Today, we will enjoy presentations from agencies involved in Nevada's transportation, energy, and public utilities sectors. Before we begin today's meeting, I want to briefly review how our virtual meetings will work. The legislative building remains closed to the public, and so all committee meetings will be held virtually. Committee members, staff, and everyone else will participate either through Zoom or by telephone. For committee members, if you could please remember to silence or turn off all your electronics and phones during the meeting and mute your microphones while you are not speaking to minimize background noise. Leave your cameras on so that we maintain a quorum throughout the meeting. And please state your name for the record every time you unmute your mic to speak. It helps us keep accurate records and meeting minutes. Members of the public who wish to testify or present public comment will have the option to call in or submit written testimony or comments. This can be done online at the page for today's meeting on Nellis, which is located on the legislature's website. In the same place, you will find today's agenda. Members of the public have the option to submit an opinion on bills online and to sign up to participate during the public comment period at the end of today's meeting. All the materials submitted for a meeting will be posted on the committee's webpage and on the legislator's website. The meeting can be viewed through our streaming service or the legislature's YouTube channel, both of which can be accessed on the legislator's website. If you have missed a meeting and you would like to know what happened, all the committee meetings are recorded and posted on the legislature's website, usually the next day. Anyone who would like to receive an electronic notification of committee agendas, minutes, can do so by signing up on the Nevada Legislature's website or by contacting the committee manager. She's available by email at asmgi@asm.state.nv.us. As always, if you need help or have questions, please don't hesitate to contact our committee staff. We are always available by email. That address also appears on our committee page on Nellis and the agenda for today's meeting. So with that, we have 3 presentations, and I'm happy to see that on our first presentation, one of my longtime friends, Ms. Jennifer Taylor, will be joining us as well with Director Bobstein. So our first presentation for the day will be joined by the staff, as I said, from the Governor's Office of Energy, and we will have Director Bobstein and Ms. Jennifer Taylor, who is the Deputy Director of Intergovernmental Relations, join us. And if you are in the room, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to see if I can share my screen here. Okay, there we go. Hope everyone can see that. Thank you again, Madam Chair. David Bobstein for the record. Nice to see you again. in this next week of the legislative session. I'm the director of the Governor's Office of Energy for Governor Steve Sisolak, and both Ms. Taylor and I are delighted to be with you this afternoon to present an overview of our office, some updates about our activities, and certainly some previews and some highlights of issues we believe will be before you and before you and this committee in specific this coming session. There we go. Okay. So our mission at the Governor's Office of Energy is to ensure the wise development of Nevada's energy resources in harmony with local economic needs and to position Nevada to lead the nation in renewable energy production, energy conservation, exportation of energy, and transportation electrification. If you're looking for our statutes, they are NRS 701 and 701A. And here's a little bit more about our office. I won't read the entire slide to you. Here is the universe of activities that you will find at the Governor's Office of Energy. This is not an exhaustive list, but these are certainly the major items, and they fall under the different buckets you see here: energy efficiency, renewable energy, transportation electrification, and then general energy programs. As you are well aware, Governor Sisolak's clean energy vision is that he is committed to regaining Nevada's position as a clean energy leader to combat the indisputable effects of climate change for future generations and for the abundance of green-collar jobs Nevada can create right now. And we certainly know that that is now more important than ever. We are the Energy Innovation Hub. A lot of the work that we do and the value that we provide is in working with other partners across the government space, in state government, local government, and here are just some of those agencies that we work with on a regular basis and some of the topics that we cover. But specifically for today, and this is more like the agenda slide for what you can expect for the rest of this presentation. We're going to go over briefly the Climate Initiative and State Climate Strategy, very briefly, because of course you received it last week. Going to talk about energy efficiency, renewable energy, transportation electrification, energy assurance, and then grants and funding, and then we'll close out with regional electricity markets, a topic I know was before the Legislative Committee on Energy over the interim. So as you are aware, the Climate Initiative, following on action in 2019, Governor Sisolak signed Executive Order 2019-22 back in November of 2019. The primary thrust of that was tasking state agencies to develop the climate strategy. As you know, that was released last December, and we again appreciate the opportunity that we had last week to present that strategy to this committee. So talking about some of the programs that we work with, home energy retrofit opportunities for seniors. The HEROES program is one that we think has tremendous value. And we work with low-income Nevada seniors. This is also in coordination with the Nevada Housing Division to help them with energy efficiency improvement projects to help them save money on their energy bills. The International Energy Conservation Codes, IECC, these are the model building codes that are every few years updated and have become more and more effective in yielding energy efficiency savings in the built environment. The office is tasked with updating each update of the code, and then we work with local governments across the state as they follow their own update schedule. The local building departments then use that as the guide for how they review projects that come before them. We've been very active with other states recently in the code update process, advocating for strengthening of the code in ways that help achieve our climate goals. And of course, light bulb efficiency. You may recall from last legislative session, AB 54, which passed unanimously from the legislature to really take Nevada's longtime occupation of the field, if you will, to make sure that we had strong light bulb efficiency standards in place. And those are now in effect. as of January 1 of this year, mandating a minimum standard of energy efficiency of 45 lumens per watt for light bulbs, general purpose light bulbs that are sold in Nevada. We are not the only state to do this. And of course, as you know, if you've had to buy a light bulb recently, chances are this is the bulb that you're going to be getting anyways. The prices have come down on LED technology. They save money on your power bills, and they certainly last longer than the older incandescent models. It's estimated that the average savings to Nevadans is $81 per household on their electricity bills if they adopt the newer light bulbs. So the Green Building Tax Abatement Program is one that has a long history before the legislature. And what it does essentially is provide tax abatements to projects that have energy efficiency features. We, as part of our budget, and we'll go more into this proposal when we get to our budget presentation and then a subsequent budget bill to accompany our budget, we are proposing a sunset of the program. We will be coming forward with third-party analysis shortly. We had some consultants do an audit and an analysis of the progression of building codes over the years and how they match with the requirements of the program. It is our opinion that the abatements no longer serve the purpose that they once did. So that's your preview of a budget bill that we'll be bringing forward later this session. Now I want to switch to renewable energy programs. Our two major ones are the renewable energy tax abatements, as well as the lower income solar energy program. We'll talk about RETA first. You may recall in 2019, SB 298 authorized an increase in RETA administrative fees to partially fund GOE's support of the renewable energy development industry. And during the pandemic, it's been remarkable because we've had 6 renewable energy projects in the last year were approved for RETA, totaling 513 megawatts of renewable energy, a projected $645 million of investment and 563 new jobs. So RETA has resulted in more than $9 billion in capital investment, property and sales and use taxes and employment benefits, and has created more than 10,000 jobs and supported more than 5,000 megawatts of renewable energy development. So we continue to be excited about this program. We certainly see an uptick in activity despite the pandemic and our economic conditions that we're facing right now as a state. So Iecc is a joint effort of NV Energy and the Governor's Office of Energy that offers incentives for solar photovoltaic systems to serve lower income populations. We're talking about apartment complexes, food banks. It's a broad range of projects over the years that have been supported across the state. The program was created as a pilot program back in 2013 and then made permanent in 2017 by SB 145. And there's a total budget right now of $1,200,000, $1 million from NV Energy and $200,000 from GOE is our match that we bring to the table. Iecc projects have included things such as the Boys and Girls Club of Southern Nevada, Silverado Apartments in Elko, and the Highland Manor Apartments in Carson City. So if you ever want to dive in and see one of those projects, let us know and we can arrange for you to see them. So on the renewable energy front, and this is definitely an issue to flag because there's certainly a lot of activity at the federal level that's happening. I mentioned before the fee authorization we were granted last session to partially support work that we do advocating for the clean energy economy in the state. I had the opportunity and the privilege to represent the state in 2019 for a hearing in support of the Public Lands Renewable Energy Development Act, which seeks to set a target for renewable energy development on federally managed public lands, as well as better align resources of the land management agencies to achieve that target. Lo and behold, many of the components of that bill made it into the Energy Act of 2020 that passed late last year. And so now that 25 gigawatt by 2025 target for public lands renewable energy development is in place. And so we're certainly going to see a lot of interest as a result of that. And we've been working with solar industry and conservation advocates both on a wide range of issues related to permitting, resourcing at the land management agencies, siting, et cetera. And so we're very appreciative of the additional fee authority we were given last session to do this work and be a part of this exciting trajectory of just more and more renewable energy development and opportunity and jobs in the state. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Deputy Director Taylor. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, sorry, and let her take over.
Thank you, Director Bobzian. Let me take one moment to get my screen set up here. Okay. Hold on, sorry for the tech issues.
That's quite all right. That is the life of virtual meetings. So
I know, and I just want to make sure I get the right one here. This one. Chairwoman, I even rehearsed this. Okay, hold on a second. Okay. So you should have my slide, and I'm going to, at a very high level, talk about transportation electrification, energy assurance, and grants and finance. So good afternoon, Chairwoman Monroe Moreno. So great to see you, even though it's virtual, and Vice Chair Watts. Great to see you and all members of the committee. Thank you so much for giving GOE the time to share our programs with you. As Director Bobzian said, my name is Jennifer Taylor. I am the Deputy Director for Intergovernmental Relations. As you heard from Director Bobzian in mentioning the climate action and the climate strategy, transportation is now our largest source of greenhouse gas emissions at 36% of our total emissions. But we know that innovative policies and programs will be needed to reduce emissions from the sector. And you see recognition of these challenges in the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection's rulemaking on low emission vehicles and zero emission vehicle standards. Additionally, as you heard from the Climate Initiative team, there were a number of transportation policies analyzed for climate mitigation, including a clean truck program, the adoption of low carbon fuel standards, a rebate system, and closing emissions inspection loopholes for classic car license plates. In the meantime, GOE continues to invest in electric vehicle charging infrastructure as we see a steady growth of electric vehicles in the market. While EVs represent less than 1% of the total vehicle registration in Nevada, there has been a solid trend of growth in the EV market year over year, with an increase of more than double the inventory from 2018 to FY 2020. And of course, with all of this ongoing, there is a recognition of the interrelated issue of how we increase the market share of electric vehicles while providing equitable support for Nevada's roads and infrastructure across all vehicle types and users. This is some of the work that GOE is engaged in the transportation electrification space. The first is our Nevada Electric Highway, which is funded by the VW settlement. It continues to expand electric vehicle charging across Nevada. Right now, we have provided a network of 30 charging locations. 2 of them are still pending across our 5 major corridors, I-80, I-15, US 95, US 93, and US 50. And we're working toward Federal Highway Administration alternative fuel corridor designations for EVs for potential future infrastructure funding. As I noted, there's 30 total projects, 21 have been completed, 7 are in development, and 2 are in the planning phase with planned completion around June 2021. Just a little bit of statistics from the highway. We have had about 31 charging sessions recorded, dispensing 35,000 kilowatts of electricity, which is the equivalent to eliminating GHG emissions from 62,000 miles driven by an average passenger vehicle. Nevada is also is doing work at a regional level. As you see from the map, Nevada really is a keystone state between the West Coast and our Intermountain West neighbors. We currently co-chair the Rev West initiative, which was created through a 2017 Memorandum of Understanding and a 2019 Memorandum of Understanding update between the governors of 8 Western states to develop a network of electric vehicle charging infrastructure throughout the Intermountain West's highway corridors. And that's why Nevada's continued electrification of our highways is such a critical part of developing a charging infrastructure all through the West Coast, as we serve as, again, that keystone state between the West Coast and the Intermountain West. In December 2020, the Rev West Group released a progress report highlighting its work since the launch. More than 100 DC fast charging stations have been built by private and public sectors, with at least 75 additional stations in the planning phase and about 1,215 miles of designated electric charging corridors. There's also the Core West initiative, which just launched in 2020. And the goal of that, again, regional initiative is to identify barriers to EV adoption and support the infrastructure deployment in rural and remote areas. Additionally, starting in July of 2020, GOE partnered with NV Energy to offer 2 new incentive categories for level 2 electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Qualifying entities include governmental or low-income multifamily housing projects. These qualifying entities can receive 100% of infrastructure costs for level 2 chargers. NV Energy provides 75% of the project costs, and GOE funds 25%, up to $40,000. UNLV was our first applicant for this program, reserving 2 dual port level 2 EV chargers. GOE's intergovernmental outreach to promote this program is continuing in partnership with NV Energy. This is an event from just about a year ago, a little bit more than a year ago. This was, you can see this picture here of the ribbon cutting in Mesquite. And I know that some of the members of the committee were able to join us. And thank you for the continued support of these events with designations for our charging stations. So again, as I noted on the prior slide, the Nevada Electric Highway is that partnership between GOE and electric service providers along those 5 major corridors. Again, looking at the alternative fuel corridor signage, that is part of the Federal Highway Administration's corridor designation for alternative fuels. In this case, this was the designation of I-15's ability to be designated as a corridor ready for EVs under that program. So now I'm going to move on to energy assurance. GOE coordinates on emergency responses with the Department of Public Safety's Emergency Management Division. They are the lead agency in emergency responses and during disasters. GOE serves as the primary agency for Emergency Support Function 12, which is also known as ESF 12. And for energy, we work in coordination in those situations with DEM. GOE may also coordinate its ESF 12 efforts with any local government agency that may be overseeing disaster response on energy-related issues. Part of our work in the energy assurance space is the Energy Assurance and Emergency Operations Plan, which outlines strategies to address and mitigate energy supply shortages and disruptions. In October 2020, an updated plan was signed by Governor Sisolak, and this was the first update in about 8 years to the plan. It elaborated and expanded on roles for GOE and other agencies in fuel shortage work. And it is an ongoing work that will continue to be updated for this critical function for GOE. The second piece of this is FEMA and the new hazard mitigation program that they've developed, known as BRIC, which is Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities. GOE was really proud to partner with and submit two proposals through again the Division of Emergency Management to FEMA. The first was a project with the City of Reno that would look to testing and design around large penetrations of renewable energy and battery charging systems for critical infrastructure. And for the City of Reno specifically, this project focuses on their new public safety center. The second project that we proposed and submitted to FEMA was for UMC to evaluate its critical loads on its campus for the trauma center and the 7-story tower in order to assess improvements, replacements, and/or designs for the building systems that might be needed to integrate on-site generation, storage, and microgrid systems. Along additional lines for grants and funding, we have the Nevada Clean Energy Fund. NCEF this year has continued its organizational work with a full slate of directors. In August 2020, Director Bob Zien appeared before the Interim Finance Committee, where they authorized GOE to utilize repurposed ARA funds to provide operational startup funding over 2 years. NCEF is currently recruiting for an executive director and expects to fill that position in early 2021. And I mentioned the ICF meeting, not just for the funding timeline, but also because Director Bob Zien had highlighted for the committee the sort of national interest and opportunities under a new administration for green bank setups and funding from a national perspective. So last Wednesday, Senators Van Hollen, Blumenthal, Markey, Representative Schatz, and Representative Debbie Dingell reintroduced what's known as the Clean Energy and Sustainability Accelerator Act, which would, under the proposed legislation, be capitalized with $100 billion and create jobs and provide potentially flow down funding to organizations like the NCEF at the local level. And again, note that we are looking actively to find the executive director that will lead the startup for NCEF. And one other funding opportunity that was just released yesterday and that the office worked on, in 2019, Senate Bill 536 authorized previously targeted ARA funds that were part of GOE's revolving loan program to be used instead for grants. We created this targeted grant program after that approval, and the newly created grant program will address goals and initiatives of the state of Nevada, including renewable energy, energy efficiency, grid modernization and energy resilience, energy storage and innovative clean energy technologies, energy education and workforce development, climate change initiatives, and transportation transformation. The first funding that we released again yesterday, and we expect to have a selected recipient by spring. It focuses on Nevada's tribal nations in identifying solutions to advance energy resiliency, increase clean energy access, and offer opportunities for economic development and diversification on tribal lands. And we are looking forward to seeing some innovative and impactful applications be submitted. And with that, I am going to stop sharing and pass it back over to Director Bob Zien to finish up, but we'll stand available for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. David Bob Zien for the record. We're just going to close out with a look at the regional markets issue. I know that this was a topic that generated some interest during the Legislative Committee on Energy proceedings. We're in receipt of the committee's letter urging us, amongst other parties, to work on this issue, and we were pleased to get that, and wanted to just give you a window into all the various things that we're doing on that front. And this is a little bit of a segue for you to your next presentation from the Public Utilities Commission. If I don't say it, they probably will. We always like pointing out the distinction between what the PUC does and what the Governor's Office of Energy does. They are the regulators when it comes to energy, and we are the policy folks. And so oftentimes we will engage as in a formal party process, intervening in dockets to represent the state's energy interest in their proceedings. But other times we work more informally, sharing technical information and perspectives. And this particular issue is one of those examples of a partnership. As you certainly have heard in the past, we are in Nevada part of the energy imbalance market that is hosted by the California Independent System Operator. This map that you see on the screen shows you a wide swath of different participants in that market. Ultimately, better regionalization of electricity markets is helpful on a number of fronts as we adopt across the West, either through state policy or utility goals, more and more clean energy. It'll be helpful to have these markets so that we can exchange electrons and address load profiles that are differing because of seasonalities and latitudes. Issues as simple as when the sun goes down in one part of the Western region and the solar drops off, the nighttime wind from places east can come into the market. All of these benefits can hopefully be realized through greater regionalization beyond even just the spot market relationship that we have right now in the EIM, which has brought, as you have heard, many of you have heard in past hearings, many benefits to customers in Nevada. So as part of that, we work in what's called the WIRED Initiative, which is a West-wide conversation facilitated by the Center for New Energy Economy at Colorado State University. It's a dialogue between governors, energy advisors, and utilities on how to evolve these market relationships. We also, and this is where we partner with the Public Utilities Commission, serve on a steering committee for a Department of Energy funded study, really doing the analysis of varying wholesale electricity market options and scenarios to see what the benefits would be for various states, various balancing authorities to guide and chart that conversation. So just wanted to flag this issue for the committee. I think it's very important that legislators have a view of this very important and yet incredibly complex topic. It's not necessarily, I think, in my opinion, that it requires legislative action necessarily, but it certainly requires attention and awareness. If anything, various actions that may happen on the legislative front could benefit or could hinder Nevada's future ability to participate in a market where we are both benefiting our ratepayers, but also benefiting our economy through the further expansion and growth of renewable energy development and the jobs that come with them. So with that, I will wrap this up and stand for questions.
Thank you both for the presentation, and thank you both for the work that you did with the Interim Committee on Energy. You were dedicated. Once we could not meet in person, I don't think you guys missed any of the Zoom meetings we had, so we truly appreciate that work. And the conversations that led to some of the legislation we're going to see this legislative session. I know we have a few members that have questions, but the first question I have for either one of you, I have some new members on this committee that may not know as much about the energy field as members who were here last time, or especially the two of you, the experts. By chance, do you have a one-pager with all the acronyms so that you could send over to our committee, our committee manager, so that everyone can be up to speed?
we need to do that. Thank you, Madam Chair, David Bobstein, for the record. Very much appreciate the question, and I strive very hard to cut through the acronyms and the abbreviations as much as I can, but I think it's inevitable that you fall into it when you get into energy. And all the fancy acronyms and abbreviations make this policy issue set seem much more opaque than it needs to be. So yes, we will work on trying to put together a glossary of the usual terms that you hear. We may very well be coordinating with the Public Utilities Commission to put that together, but we'll get something to you shortly.
That sounds great. Thank you. We'll start off our questions with Assemblywoman Brown May.
Thank you, Chairman Moreno. Thank you, Director Robzian and Deputy Director Taylor for your presentation. Really appreciate the level of information and the detail. My question is relative to the slide detailing the transportation electrification programs, specifically the electric vehicle charging incentives. And you mentioned targeting low-income families and government entities, and that funding was available for electric charging stations. So my question is, do you have a target number of stations that you are trying to reach, a number of units installed? And then is there a cap on the funding that's available for that? How are we reaching low-income families? So I guess that's a three-part question.
Deputy Director, you want to take that?
Sure. Thank you, Director Bobzian. Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman, and congratulations on your appointment and welcome to the legislature. So as far as the funding, there is not necessarily a target number of entities we're trying to reach because there is capped funding. So it's $300,000 for each. $300,000 for each of the programs for the multifamily and for the governmental. The multifamily, and it's multifamily low income. So it's not low income single family. It's only for those multifamily low income projects. And we have done workshops with NV Energy and done outreach to the entities that help to serve those multifamily low income developments. And that work, as I noted on my slide, will continue so that we can make sure we get as much outreach and engagement from the folks that we're targeting as possible. And we're looking forward to that program continuing into the next annual plan year, which will start on July 1 of 2021.
Any follow-up to that, Assemblywoman Brown May?
No, thank you, Chairman Moreno. I appreciate the response. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think Assemblyman Miller has questioning along the same line, and then we'll have Assemblywoman Peters.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. My question is about more specifically in the area of the multifamilies, like in apartment communities and HOAs. What does the plan or the goal look like to get the charging stations there? When you consider a single family home, you can have your own dedicated charging station. But when you're in an apartment community where there are oftentimes probably more cars than charging stations can reasonably be put in, are there any particular goals or strategies to try to get that down to, I guess, as much as a one car, one charging station possibility? Are there strategies that you are aware of within the industry that will make that a little easier to do? Just trying to get some understanding there as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question, Assemblyman. And Jennifer Taylor, again, for the record, I think that what I would offer is that let us potentially also put together for you some specific information on those programs so that you have that. The idea of a strategy for developing within multifamily communities There are incentive programs. Again, that is part of analysis done annually by the Public Utility Commission that support the development of infrastructure for charging. The next plan year starts again, like I said, July 1, and NV Energy, that is again our primary utility provider for the state, has just submitted its annual plan with those proposed incentives. And that could be something that I'll take a look at, and we can get you the data. But this is an issue that is of great concern and great interest to many stakeholders and industry as well. And so there has been, I would say, a lot of collaborative work around how to best tackle some of the challenges that exist, just as you described, within multifamily housing, regardless of the income strata that may be the residents of that housing. It is a challenge, and it is something that we continue to look at and to see how we can do outreach and partnerships and convening on furthering that development.
Madam Chair, if I might, David Bobstein for the record, through you to Assemblyman Miller. Just some additional context to the information that Jennifer provided. I think it's important to recognize the pilot nature of many of the energy programs in which we participate. This one is certainly because it's the first year. The idea in partnership with NV Energy was really a brainstorm we had together where we said, okay, well, we need to enter the space and see what it's like to develop charging in the multifamily apartment environment, recognizing the importance of that charging for the transition to electrified transportation. And so the hope is gaining some early experience, learning some lessons, being able to do a first toe in the water, to then inform what I hope to be, more comprehensive planning around adoption in the multifamily space on a much broader level. So I don't think we're there yet. If I understood your question, to the point where we're making, specific targets and having a more comprehensive look on where to go. I think it's right now, can we get a few of these projects done? Can we have a few partners step up and make the investments and learn the lessons, and where do we go from there?
Thank you for the additional context. And I guess as we look forward into moving towards this electrification, just considering how many cars can be in one household or in one multifamily household, and just kind of, trying to get an understanding of how we think forward on that and what we're looking at. So any information as you get it, if you would please share it with me. I'd love to know and be in the know of what's developing. Thank you, Chair, for the time.
Thank you.
And I might add, if I could, thank you, Assemblyman David Bobstein, for the record. We'll absolutely get that information to you. Would love to share in the conversation with you. And again, from a very high level, we understand the equity challenges and imperatives behind transportation electrification. And so it's all well and good for those with the means to have charging for their EVs in their garage to be able to get electric vehicles. But, we hope that there's broader access across all of Nevada's communities to the benefits of EV ownership.
Thank you. And I think all of the members could benefit from that information. So once you have it, would you send it to our committee manager, and she will get it to all of the members? That would be great. I believe Assemblywoman Peters has a few questions.
Thank you, Chair. And a third one came up for me, so if I may indulge, I have a third question as well. Okay. My first question should be relatively simple, I think. I just was wondering if you could expand on who are eligible recipients of the Renewable Energy Tax Abatement, and how much of that tax abatement goes towards the everyday working Nevadan who are, employees in the state or taxpayers in the state.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Assemblywoman Peters, David Bobstein for the record. We will get you a specific information sheet on the RETA program, but the broad contours are there have been over the years certainly components of the program that are designed to benefit Nevada workers and provide health benefits to those workers. So there's a requirement for Nevada Hire with the program. They have to be renewable energy projects to be eligible for the tax abatement itself. But there's been a long history of the Nevada Legislature ensuring that there's Nevada benefits for jobs in particular from the program. So we'll follow up with you and give you the specific program sheet that lays out all the specifics of the program.
Perfect. I appreciate that, and we'll follow up with you on questions that may bring up for me. My second question is regarding the funding opportunity to assist tribal nations. I am familiar with the program in California for tribes assisting with energy resiliency, and I was wondering about what the scope of this particular grant program for the state of Nevada looks like. How your office will be assisting those tribes, and any prerequisites for that program for grant submissions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you to Assemblywoman Peters. I'll take a first crack at this, and Deputy Director Taylor may fill in the gaps for me because she was really instrumental in putting together this notice of funding opportunity, and so she may know some of the details better than I do. But I will say this.
You can go
Yes.
directly to the member. You don't have to go.
Okay, thank you. Old habits. Thank you for recognizing the California experience. And in fact, as we were putting together and doing the scoping for what the opportunity would look like, we actually did work with the California Energy Commission to kind of get a window into what they did. And so there is some alignment there in terms of where we're hoping to go with this program. We also worked extensively with the Department of Energy on putting this together. It's important to note, and this is very clear in all the information that was released this week about the NOFO on our website, that these are repurposed ARA funds. And those, many of you may remember from the last recession, how the ARA story went in Nevada. And certainly, as I had pledged last session to the money committees as we were going forward to put this grant program together, we have built in much stronger accountability, I believe, than what was present during the loan era of these ARA funds. So because of that, there's a very clear and structured application process and review process. There are also requirements, and I think this is responsive to your question about prerequisites. Remember, these are federal funds, and so all of the federal procurement requirements incumbent with those ARA funds, things like Buy America, Davis-Bacon, et cetera, all of those need to be adhered to. And so our announcement makes all of that very clear. But we're hopeful that whether it's energy planning, whether it's resilience, there are a wide range of energy topics that could be applicable to interested tribal nations that make application. And so Deputy Director Taylor, I don't know if I missed anything with that you wanted to highlight.
No, thank you, Director Bobzian, and thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Peters. As Director Bobzian said, there are very clear prerequisites spelled out in the NOFO documents. But what we did for the scope was recognizing that there's different, that the different tribal nations may be in different places for what they view as critical pieces of energy resilience and economic development opportunities around that. We did structure the NOFO so that it can be infrastructure development, which would then have those Buy American, Davis-Bacon, those types of prerequisites on it. But there is also an opportunity for regulatory consulting and analysis and planning consulting and analysis that the tribal nations could submit. We did work with the Nevada Indian Commission in some of the development of the grant and in outreach to our tribal nations. And think that sort of fills in the little bits of color that I was wanting to share with you about this, but we're, again, really excited about this opportunity. So thank you for giving us a chance to talk a little bit more about it.
Thank you for bringing the opportunity. I just see so much opportunity to do some really innovative trials in Indian country. So I'm excited to see how that program falls out. Now, my third question has to do with hazard mitigation and emergency response programs that you guys mentioned have been updated and you've been working on. I just wanted to know if you guys, because I think that the PUC is also working on this component with our major transmission companies. But I wanted to know from your office, are you addressing climate change vulnerabilities in those hazard mitigation and emergency response planning documents?
Director Bobzian, if I may just cover one small piece and then you could fill in if that's okay.
Sounds good.
Okay, great, thank you. So the Energy Assurance Plan does not specifically in its current form address specific climate mitigation efforts, but for the FEMA and the BRIC grants, there are components around environmental benefits that have to be part of your analysis for submission. And so I just wanted to highlight that, and then I'll let the director fill in anything that may be also responsive to your question. Oh, and actually, sorry, Director, Assemblywoman, to your last question, I apologize. I would really just love to share with you that at the Office of Indian Energy through DOE, there's all kinds of fantastic analysis that echoes what you said about the opportunities on tribal lands. And if you would like me to send you one of those studies, I'm happy to shoot that over to you or to the committee manager for your information. Sorry, and with that, I'll pass it back to Director Bobzian.
Nothing to add, thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. I would appreciate that. I may already have that in one of my files because I've been doing a lot of work and study in this area for my California programs. But I'm just really excited to see how this goes, and so grateful that the states are stepping up as partners in this area.
Thank you so much. Members, is there anyone else with any questions? Okay, I am seeing none. I do have one question. You had talked about the executive director's position for the Nevada Clean Energy Fund. Could you tell me a little bit more about that position? Will that position be located up north, in the south? Where will that position be located? And what are you looking for in that director's position?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. David Bobzian for the record. As I made clear to the Interim Finance Committee in my update over the summer, it is my desire to see this position be based in Las Vegas for the very simple reason that it's a twofold job. They've got to raise the money, capitalize the bank, and they have to find the projects to make loans to. So I don't see how the position couldn't be in Las Vegas. So we're very hopeful that that's where that position will go. I also, again, want to highlight kind of the arrangement here because we've made this very clear to the legislature, and we're sticking by this. We needed 2 years of funding to incubate the Clean Bank or the Green Bank, the Clean Energy Fund, to get it off the ground, helping with operations, helping with the salary for the executive director. But then we're passing the baton. It is an independent 501c3 organization with its own governing board. We have a number of ex officio designated folks from the administration that are part of that board. But ultimately, it's going to have to go and be its own thing. And so Deputy Director Taylor mentioned the federal legislation that we're very hopeful will provide some federal assistance to capitalize these banks. But there's also private capital that the executive director will be charged with securing to get into the bank and start making some projects. So, certainly a theme of this session is all the tools that we need to chart our recovery. And we are very hopeful that will be up and running soon with this tool to assist in that effort.
Perfect. Thank you. So I am not seeing any other questions from members. So I am going to thank you both for joining us here today. It's always a pleasure to see you both at this committee meeting, and we'll probably see more of you as other bills come up throughout the session. So have a great day until we see you again. So next on our agenda is the overview of the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada. And we will have Chair Haley Williamson, who's the Executive Director, and Stephanie Mullen and Garrett Weir, I think you're all here, who serves as General Counsel for the Commission. So whenever you are ready to present, you may start. And I must apologize, I have to step away just for a second, and Vice Chair Watts will take over in my absence.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm just going to share my screen here. All right, I hope everyone can see this. Good afternoon, Chair Monroe-Moreno, members of the committee. I am Stephanie Mullen, Executive Director for the Public Utilities Commission. With me, as you mentioned, is our Chair, Ms. Haley Williamson, and our General Counsel, Garrett Weir. Today, we're going to share just a brief overview of the agency's operations and structure, including types of proceedings and industries we regulate, as well as provide an update on the implementation from legislation from 2019. The PUCN is a regulatory agency that ensures investor-owned utilities comply with laws enacted by the Nevada Legislature. The basic regulatory duties, powers, and scope of work are defined by the legislature and codified in statute. The PUCN regulates approximately 400 investor-owned utilities engaged in electric, natural gas, telecommunications, water and wastewater services, gas and electric master meter services at mobile home parks, and some propane systems. The agency is also involved in monitoring gas pipeline safety, which includes monitoring the design, construction, operation, and maintenance of gas systems, and underground excavation near subsurface installations. Additionally, the Rail Safety Division monitors 4 disciplines within the state. They are hazardous materials, operations practices, track, and motive power and equipment. The continuous involvement in the monitoring and oversight of these safety programs helps to ensure our safe infrastructure in Nevada. Following the emergency directives from Governor Sisolak, the PUCN closed its doors to the public and transitioned to working from home, adopting the use of virtual video conferencing and other remote technologies to conduct business, including twice-monthly agendas, pre-hearing conferences, hearings, workshops, and educational meetings. Public commenting requirements were maintained with the implementation of special telephone lines so the public could call in during commission agenda meetings and consumer sessions, and main phone lines continued to be staffed, allowing the public to get needed information and assistance. Via its website, the PUCN created a comprehensive and up-to-date COVID-related webpage sharing Nevada Utilities plans to assist customers during the pandemic. I am very proud to say that even when and with the unprecedented challenges that COVID brought, the agency has been able to carry on. Over the last biennium, we held 49 public agenda meetings, conducted 8 rulemaking hearings to address legislative directives, participated in and ruled on 5 electric and water resource planning dockets, issued 26 UWEPA permits and 54 certificates of public convenience. We held 22 consumer sessions and community meetings across the state, both in person and remotely. We fielded over 6,200 questions and complaints from Nevadans, safely conducted 210 field inspection days for the pipeline safety program and over 3,000 rail units. Additionally, the safety division investigated 4 gas incidents and 81 railroad incidents. with nearly 380 compliances ordered and over $983,000 in fines and penalties collected and sent to the state's general fund. Now I'm going to move on to the organizational structure, which also plays a very important role in meeting requirements set forth by the agency. The 103 full-time employees are contained in two distinct parts within the agency. There's the commission and the regulatory operations staff. The commission is a quasi-judicial 3-person panel appointed by the governor in staggered 4-year terms. Our current commissioners, Chair Haley Williamson, Commissioner CJ Manthe, and Commissioner Tammy Cordova preside over contested cases and make decisions regarding the operations of public utilities. The regulatory operations staff, often referred to as staff, is an independent division that investigates and audits utility operations and participates as a party in all proceedings before the commission. Careful attention is given to ensure the independence of staff, and the commission is prohibited from communicating with staff in any manner that undermines the due process rights of other parties. However, because the commission and staff are housed within the same state agency, they share certain administrative support for matters unrelated to their respective roles as decision maker and litigant in contested cases. And finally, I just wanted to make a quick note on funding. It's important to know that the PUCN is funded through an annual regulatory assessment or mill assessment and does not compete for general fund programs or money. The mill assessment is an annual collection and an annual calculation that is made based on the revenues for utilities that operate in the state of Nevada. Using reported revenues from the utilities and the PUCN's anticipated expenditures, we're able to determine what the mill assessment rate needs to be set at in order to meet the needs of the agency and keep the agency within an optimum reserve range. And with that, I will pass it over to Garrett Weir.
All right. Can you guys see me, or are we on Ms. Mullen's screen still?
You can see me.
Okay. So for the record, Garrett Weir, General Counsel for the Public Utilities Commission. And I'm just going to walk through the types of proceedings that the Commission has and the various sectors of utility operations that the Commission regulates. So first, our Executive Director mentioned the quasi-judicial nature of the Public Utilities Commission. It is an executive branch agency, but it performs a quasi-judicial function in presiding over contested cases. It also performs quasi-legislative functions in adopting regulations. So the types of cases that are contested are generally those applications like rate cases, where the Commission engages in rate making, looks at the costs of providing safe, reliable service to customers, and sets appropriate rates. Customer complaints and proceedings that involve evaluating whether there needs to be penalties for certain misconduct by regulated entities, and to ensure reliable, safe service. Rulemakings, that's the regulatory function. The Commission regularly, generally following legislative sessions, opens multiple rulemaking proceedings to implement legislation. There are occasionally rulemakings undertaken pursuant to the Commission's general authority to adopt regulations for regulation of public utilities, but usually we have the vast majority of our regulations that are adopted in recent years have been pursuant to legislation. And then petitions, there's an opportunity for people to file for general relief from the Commission seeking advisory opinions or declaratory orders regarding matters within the jurisdiction of the Commission. And then finally, investigations. The Commission regularly undertakes initiates investigations to look into utility service in various areas. So I guess we can go to the next slide. The electric sector that the Commission regulates is primarily related to two electric utilities in the state that provide retail, fully regulated service. That's Nevada Power Company in the south and Sierra Pacific Power Company in the north, and they both do business under the name NV Energy. The Commission only regulates the cooperative associations within the state, generally in rural areas of the state, with regard to their service territory boundaries. And the purpose for the Commission not having, or the policy of the Commission not having oversight of the regulations, is that there's ultimately accountability by the members of the cooperative associations. There's accountability to the organizations that adopt rates, and they can ultimately unelect them. So, in the electric sector, the PUCN regularly presides over cases involving rate making, integrated resource planning, and permitting, and as I mentioned, has many cases implementing numerous state policies and programs related to things like renewable energy development, energy efficiency and conservation, and consumer protection. And then just staying within this sector, it's important to note that these are cases that determine the prices that Nevadans pay for electricity and the short and long-term planning obligations for utilities who serve Nevadans. And so the rates charged to customers of electric service consist of various components that recover particular costs of providing service. The two largest components of that are the purchased power costs and general costs, which include the costs of operating a utility that aren't collected through another specific rate. So the rates set by the Commission allow for recovery of only prudent and reasonably incurred costs, plus revenues sufficient for utilities to earn a reasonable return on their capital investments. Notably, the PUCN does not allow NV Energy to earn a profit on fuel and purchased power costs, which include renewable energy purchase power agreements or the natural gas that the utility purchases for use in generating facilities. Also, it's important to note that the Commission does not allow a return on the costs of operation and maintenance expenses, such as employee salaries. It's this prudent oversight by the PUCN that's resulted in Nevada having among the most stable electric rates in the country over the past 2 decades. So one thing that I want to provide some background on that I think is important for folks to understand is that when evaluating Commission decisions that affect utility rates, it's important to recognize that it's zero-sum in nature most of the time. And that means that there are rarely win-win outcomes when parties are arguing about who should pay costs that were incurred by a utility. Allocating fewer costs to one party will result in allocating greater costs to another. Thus, commissioners who diligently fulfill their duties will inevitably draw the ire of nearly every industry and type of utility customer within the state. The losers in this decision-making process will be unhappy with the results. But for parties who believe that the Commission decision is inequitable or unlawful, there are processes in place to seek an appeal, first at the administrative agency level through reconsideration or rehearing of a matter, and subsequently through judicial review through the state's courts. And we can go to the next slide. The natural gas industry, the Commission regulates 2 investor-owned natural gas utilities. That's Southwest Gas Corporation and Sierra Pacific Power Company, doing business as NV Energy in the northern part of the state. For these utilities, the PUCN holds proceedings to set rates and to implement legislative policies promoting energy conservation, the use of renewable natural gas, and in particular the natural gas industry, the expansion of infrastructure to provide service to new areas of the state, pursuant to an economic development provision that was adopted by the legislature a couple of sessions ago. The PUCN also licenses discretionary suppliers of natural gas, known as alternative sellers, and they provide service to large industrial and commercial users in the state. Finally, the PUCN oversees gas pipeline safety in partnership with the United States Department of Transportation, Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, FEMA, Office of Pipeline Safety. So, as with electric utilities, natural gas utilities recover the cost of purchased fuel, the natural gas that they sell to customers, on just a dollar-for-dollar basis. They aren't allowed to mark up the cost of the natural gas that they sell. The return is on the investments that they've made in the infrastructure to provide that service. And next slide. So in the sector of water and wastewater service, the PUCN's primary regulatory activities include ensuring the delivery of clean, safe, reliable water to customers at reasonable rates. And for sewer, the same requirement to provide reliable service at reasonable rates and to monitor the quality of service, environmental compliance, and financial performance. The Commission fully regulates the rates, service quality, and service territories of 27 investor-owned water and wastewater utilities in the state, serving approximately 22,300 customers. The Commission regulates the service territories, but not the rates or service quality of water and wastewater utilities under control of non-investor-owned governing bodies such as cooperative associations and homeowners associations. You can go to the next slide. For rails, as Executive Director Mullen mentioned, the Commission has personnel who regularly perform inspections and are specialized in areas of inspection that enforce federal regulations. Those disciplines include operations, practice inspection, motive, power, and equipment inspection, track inspection, and hazardous materials inspection. Next slide. So for telecommunications, which is largely a deregulated utility service, the Commission does fully rate regulate small-scale providers within the state in rural areas. There are 10 of those, and the rest of the Commission's 322 telecommunication providers are comprised of incumbent local exchange carriers, as well as there are 222 competitive suppliers. And the Commission does not rate regulate those entities, but ensures, well, it regulates programs that some of those entities are able to draw from federally and at the state level. For example, there are 30 eligible telecommunication carriers in the state, which are able to access federal lifeline support. 26 of those are seeking or receive federal lifeline support to provide support telecommunication services to low-income consumers and providing discounted rates both through for mobile service as well as landline, and actually at the federal level, broadband access is included in that as well. And then we also have 9 ETCs, like eligible telecommunication carriers, receiving high cost support in the state to subsidize the build out to more rural areas where the cost of providing service is more expensive. Again mentioned that the regulatory duties include licensing wireless providers, certificating competitive suppliers, reviewing those ETCs applications for discounted rates. Okay, next slide. So utility regulation is becoming increasingly complex and has changed from merely traditional rate regulation of electricity, natural gas, investor-owned water and sewer utilities, and telecommunication to include many other things. And those things continue to grow with every year, and they grow in complexity as well. But the Commission is tasked with overseeing consumer protection and implementing consumer protection provisions coming from the federal side as well as our state. Integrated resource planning, which includes distributed resource planning, natural disaster planning, the planning for RPS compliance, as well as carbon emissions reduction goals for the state. Environmental permitting, economic development, in some cases, oversight of incentive programs for distributed energy resources, such as rooftop solar, wind turbines, water power systems, and energy storage systems, as well as electric vehicle infrastructure. We mentioned pipeline safety enforcement and gas infrastructure replacement. And finally, coordination with federal regulatory authorities such as the FCC, FERC, the DOT, we mentioned FEMA, and as well as for permitting purposes, the Department of the Interior, Bureau of Land Management. So we're always engaged in exciting, intellectually stimulating complex issues, and it continues to grow and become more interesting every year, especially as we pivot toward adopting changing technologies and implementing more aggressive policies with regard to climate change and consumer protection. So with that, my portion of the presentation is concluded. I'm going to hand off to Chair Williamson, who will be providing a brief update regarding the Commission's implementation of legislation from last session. So Haley, if you want to, or Commissioner Williamson, if you want to turn on your camera.
Thank you, Mr. Weir. Thank you, Chair Monroe-Moreno and Vice Chair Watts and committee members for having us here today. I'm happy to present an update on the very busy session you all had in 2019 and what the PUC has done with those bills. I'll just go in order here as you see them on your screen. So first off is SB 547, which required the PUCN to set annual limits on the amount of energy and capacity that may exit NV Energy's system pursuant to NRS Chapter 704B. To determine the appropriate annual limits pursuant to SB 547, the utility must present a sensitivity analysis that addresses load growth, import capacity, system constraints, and the effect of eligible customers purchasing less energy and capacity. SB 547 clarified that the impact fee charged to the exiting customer must ensure that the customer pays their load ratio share of the costs associated with the electric utility's obligations that were incurred as deviations from least cost resource planning. The Commission opened a docket 19-06029, to conduct the necessary rulemaking to implement this bill. The regulations being considered in this docket provide additional detail regarding the impact fee calculation, determining certain charges that will be paid by those customers who are approved to exit NV Energy's system pursuant to 704B. Also, the proposed regulations state that the exiting customer must pay a non-bypassable charge monthly in an amount at least equal to the customer's share of the ongoing out-of-money portion of the costs of long-term renewable energy contracts entered into by the utility, among other public policy program costs. This rulemaking was split into 3 phases. The different phases are in various draft stages. Phases 1 and 3, which pertain to the energy and capacity limits, are pending with LCB for review. Phase 2, which has to do with licensing requirements for providers of new electric resources, were recently returned to the Commission, and the Commission will continue the formal 233B rulemaking process with a workshop and hearing coming soon on those regulations. Next up, AB 465. This bill provided for expanded solar access in Nevada to low-income residents and businesses, and to those that could not access traditional net metering programs because they either rented or owned a home that was not conducive to rooftop solar. The bill also contains a solar jobs and workforce training program. The Commission is nearing the end of its rulemaking process to implement AB 465 and has actually scheduled a formal 233B workshop and hearing next week to hear these regulations. The Commission also, in docket number 20-07023, conditionally approved the first community-based solar resource for this program at the Mojave High School. NV Energy also filed its first joint expanded solar access application and implementation plan, and that's currently pending before the Commission for Commission approval. Next is SB 358. This bill increased the renewable portfolio standard to 50% renewable energy by 2030. It also added provisions to statutes related to resource planning and rate making that authorize electric utilities to acquire existing renewable facilities without getting specific approval from the PUCN for such acquisition if terms have been met, or with PUCN approval, construct a new renewable facility without placing that facility within the rate base. The PUCN opened a rulemaking, docket 19-06010, to adopt regulations in accordance with this bill. Throughout the fall of 2019 and winter of 2020, interested stakeholders such as the Nevada Conservation League, Western Resource Advocates, Boat Solar, Nevada Rural Electric Association, Mount Wheeler Power, NV Energy, Ecentricity, First Solar, regulatory operations staff, and the Bureau of Consumer Protection held numerous informal and formal workshops to discuss areas of consensus and non-consensus and to develop draft regulations. The PUCN sent draft regulations to LCB and recently received those draft regulations back. The PUCN will continue its formal 233B rulemaking process with workshops and hearings to continue this spring. Another important piece of SB 358 is the PUCN last year issued an order requiring NV Energy to submit a report containing information consistent with a net zero carbon emissions goal by 2050. NV Energy did submit this report in November. Stakeholders commented in January, and a workshop and hearing will be held on these comments. Moving on to SB 329. SB 329 established for the first time natural disaster protection plans. The Commission opened rulemaking, docket 19-06009, to adopt regulations to implement this bill, and then NV Energy filed its first joint natural disaster protection plan last June in docket numbers 20-02031 and 02032, which the Commission approved. That plan looked out 3 years and asked for updates this March and every March thereafter, so that more information could be gathered and more decisions could be made on certain aspects of the natural disaster protection plan, including certain undergrounding requirements for utility lines and public safety outage management zones, which is when the power is shut off preemptively for threat of wildfire. Moving on to SB 300. SB 300, which was adopted during the 2019 session, requires the PUCN to determine alternative rate-making mechanisms and what mechanisms an electric utility may include in an alternative rate-making plan. Alternative rate-making mechanisms represent a shift from the traditional cost of service rate-making that the PUCN and most other state utility commissions have applied to utilities for decades. The electric utility industry is changing rapidly, and as a result, regulators across the country are evaluating whether changes in rate-making are required to align regulatory mechanisms with those industry changes. SB 300 includes a menu of possible alternative rate-making mechanisms, including but not limited to performance-based rates, subscription-based pricing, formula rates, decoupling, earnings sharing mechanisms, and multi-year rate plans. Although the PUCN has already implemented many of the alternative rate-making mechanisms listed in 300 in some form, it will now, under SB 300, take a holistic view of how various alternative rate-making mechanisms interact and how traditional rate-making may be improved upon by the application of such alternatives. SB 300 also tasks the PUCN with determining the information that a utility must include in such an alternative rate-making plan. The PUCN opened the docket last summer to implement 300 and to adopt regulations. Since then, the PUCN has solicited multiple rounds of comments from stakeholders and held multiple rounds of workshops. The PUCN has also engaged with the Regulatory Assistance Project and Rocky Mountain Institute. The PUCN has released concept papers to set the stage for more stakeholder-driven processes and for collaboratively reviewing and issuing and providing not only the opportunity to talk about key questions to inform the PUCN's assessment of these alternative rate-making plans, but so that the dialogue can go back and forth with stakeholders. Subsequent to finishing the facilitated workshops, the 300 rulemaking has advanced to a strawman proposal process, and the PUCN hopes to have draft regulations sometime in the second quarter of this year. SB 299, the electric school bus bill. This bill added incentives from the Renewable Generations program for public schools to purchase electric school buses and school bus charging infrastructure. The Commission did not need to adopt regulations for this bill implementation, and so once the bill was signed, it has been implemented. The annual plans docket, as you just heard from the Governor's Office of Energy, was just filed this February with the PUCN, and the dollar amounts for those incentive programs, including the electric vehicle charging program, will be set for the upcoming year in that docket that was just filed. Next up, SB 154. This was the Renewable Gas Bill. The Commission adopted regulations to implement SB 154 regarding renewable natural gas and gas utilities incorporating renewable natural gas into their supply portfolios. SB 154 set goals for renewable natural gas, with the first goal being January 1, 2025 of not less than 1% the total amount of gas sold by the public utility to its retail customers, and that goal moves up to 3% by January 1, 2035. This year, on January 5th, 2021, Southwest Gas submitted its first application for authority to purchase renewable natural gas up to 3%, and that application is currently pending with the Commission. And finally, while not on the slide, it's very important to recognize SB 254. SB 254 from last session recognizes the threat of climate change and calls for a statewide inventory of greenhouse gas emissions and examines solutions for reducing these emissions moving forward. The Commission worked with the Governor's Office of Energy, Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, and Department of Transportation on the emissions report and looks forward to continuing this collaborative effort. And finally, the Commission also looks forward to collaborating with its sister agencies on climate change measures moving forward. And that concludes our presentation from the PUC, and we're very happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Chair Williams, Mr. Weir, Ms. Mullen, for the presentation. Very informative, and appreciate the updates on the implementation of legislation from last session. Yes, we did do quite a lot, and we appreciate you helping get those policies enacted. So with that, we will go to questions, and I will start with Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your presentation. I have just a simple question. We've seen some issues in our sister state to the west with wildfires and gas explosions. And just wondering, is there a strategy in place that ensures that our utilities are updating and upgrading their facilities so that we don't have those issues here? I know you all passed something last time, but I'm new, so I don't know all the details. So I would appreciate your assistance and information.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for the question, and through your Vice Chair Watts, the Assemblywoman.
I'm directly to the member. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I will start, and then I'm going to pass this off to Mr. Weir to say anything I missed. So the two issues, wildfire and the gas safety, are two obviously extremely important issues. You're right. We've seen our neighbors deal with these in pretty horrific fashion. Huge credit to the legislature in 2019 for passing SB 329, which for the first time required electric utilities in Nevada to file natural disaster protection plans. So we started to look at this issue holistically then. NV Energy did file its first plan that the Commission approved. It's aggressive. It calls for, number one, the most important thing we can do is a lot of vegetation management. There are sections of it that contain undergrounding of certain lines that are in high fire zone areas. And there is also the Public Safety Outage Management Program, which in California is the Public Safety Power Shutoff, which is the preemptive de-energization of power lines. So wildfire, I share your concern, has been first and foremost on my mind for a while now. And every wildfire season, we see it continues to get worse. So we continue to update those plans yearly to make sure that we are doing everything we can to aggressively monitor and regulate to the extent that we're able to the wildfire threat. For gas pipeline safety, I'm proud to say that we continue to rank #1 in the nation for gas pipeline safety. That rating comes from the federal government. And so that is also something that we take very seriously. Our inspectors are out there monitoring every day, every week of pipeline safety. We have a very aggressive pipeline safety program. And with that, I'll let Ms. Mullen or Mr. Weir pick up anything I missed.
I think Chair Williamson fairly comprehensively covered everything. She was the commissioner presiding over the National Disaster Protection Plan proceeding recently. The commission did approve the first application pursuant to that legislation. It was filed in March, and it was approved. And we still do have a pending rulemaking proceeding at the commission to examine some of the specifics of cost recovery associated with that plan. And it wouldn't. There is some ambiguity, arguably, with the legislation with regard to cost recovery, and it wouldn't surprise us if we saw this session the issue of clarification of the cost recovery, the costs for mitigating natural disaster risk, if that does come before the legislature and perhaps this committee. So that's something I guess you can keep your eyes open for, and that's currently going on at the commission right now.
Chair, may I have a follow-up question, please?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you both so very much. Thank you, Chair. I guess my question is, I guess I'm looking for a distinction between whether or not a utility has the power, the agency to turn off utilities in case of a possibility of a wildfire or gas, or whether or not they are being expected, and if not even required, to look at their own inventory of technology to ensure that it is up to date so that they're not contributing to these issues. And I say that because many years ago, when we built our house in West Las Vegas, the power infrastructure was so old. There's a lot of overhead lines, power lines in West Las Vegas, near North Las Vegas area. And from my perspective, these are things that we should be looking and expecting to be updated now that we have new technology, we understand the dangers. Is that within your purview? How do those things get moved forward so that we are moving forward with new technology to prevent these things from happening in the first place?
Great question. Thank you for the question. And again, I'll take the first shot and pass it off. So the short answer is yes. The utilities, it is, some of it at least is within our purview. Some goes to the counties, some goes to the cities, in terms of building codes and things to make, let's say, like your house safer. But for the utilities, yes. For the electric utilities regarding fire and natural disasters, part of the natural disaster protection plan is they have to bring forward the newest technology. They're bringing forward drones to monitor utility lines. They're bringing forward new weather, looking at new weather mapping, new weather centers and ways to analyze wind speeds or even specific microgrids, how dry a certain leaf is in a certain part of Reno. We're starting to look at that. Huge credit actually to Reno, the University in Reno. They're doing a lot of the weather science that actually the whole West is using. For gas, pipeline is required in Nevada. We have to update it if it's unsafe. Utilities are looking at newer technologies of pipe and updating it, and that is something also within the Commission's purview. So again, I really appreciate the comment, because some of these new technologies, as you said, we don't want to be playing catch up, right? We want to be looking forward. So to the parts that are in the power sector, the parts that we regulate for the lines themselves, the weather technology, the vegetation, how far the lines have to go out, the clearing lines of trees around power lines, that vegetation management, we're looking at that on a going forward basis, not just on a reactionary basis to get ahead of that. And then for pipe replacement, there's also standards of the different types of pipe that we look at to replace that to get ahead of never having a gas explosion.
All right, thank you, Assemblywoman, and thank you for the response. Do we have any other members that have questions for the Commission? Hearing none, I have one quick question. So, you spoke of some of the actions that the legislature took in advancing climate adaptation and mitigation, and how that's been incorporated into some of the activities of the Commission. Could you speak just a little bit more to that? And I know that in the last legislative session, we really focused on efforts in the energy generation sector. And as your presentation showed, you regulate multiple areas, not just electric utilities. And, I think there are obviously climate connections to gas, water, and some of the other areas. So could you just speak a little bit more about what else is being done and where else climate could be incorporated into some of the decisions and processes that the commission undertakes?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. First and foremost, just internally, I want to give a lot of credit to Executive Director Mullen, who in our last, we always do a multi-year report about our own internal policies and procedures. And she recognized with our team that climate change was going to be first and foremost. So we moved that as a standard for the PUC itself, so that we're viewing things in a climate lens, that we're always taking climate change into account, that we're meeting the goals set out by you folks in any legislation that comes our way in a timely manner. So we have incorporated that into our own strategic plan at the PUC, that climate change is a metric by which we want to measure our own agency by. On top of that, we have been working with our sister agencies on things like SB 254 for the emissions report, and then actually the climate strategy. We can always provide technical assistance. We have a whole building full of incredibly capable people, of engineers and accountants who are willing and excited to continue work on climate. For the other industries, that's a really great question. To the extent, and I'll let Mr. Weir talk a little bit more about these. One of the things that's, I think, unique about the commission that the Governor's Office of Energy touched on is that our quasi-judicial side is contested case-based. So the decisions we make on a record really depend on the information we get in that record. So I always very much appreciate when people participate in those dockets, advocates participate in those dockets and bring to us evidence and testimony that we can weigh in our cases to look at climate change. And then in the non-contested case realm, in the rulemakings and investigations, and we say this, and I'd love to emphasize it again, please come to us. When we have a rulemaking or an investigation and you have climate information, you're a climate advocate, please come to the PUCN. I know it's a little antiquated, but we're always happy to help. But we'll help you file comments. Please come and present what you have so that we can take it into account. And we're open to that, and we would like to continue that. And with that, I'll hand it over to Garrett and Stephanie to again fill in where I'm missing.
Thank you. For the record, Garrett Weir. Chair Williamson hit the nail on the head with regard to the quasi-judicial process. We are largely confined or constrained by the records that are put before the agency. Assemblyman Watts, you're correct, or Vice Chair Watts, you're correct that existing law does really, for the state, primarily focus on the electric industry with regard to planning, an emphasis in planning to examine the effects of planning on climate change and to implement programs that also combat climate change and carbon emissions. So, but there are ways that prudent oversight of decisions by other utilities can, be helpful. With regard to natural gas, I mean, obviously, it's important that the commission not approve recovery of investments that aren't prudent. Anything excessive where you're committing to that infrastructure that's dedicated to fossil fuels. But we do have limited ability to engage in planning for natural gas in the same way that we do for electric, which Chair Williamson was very careful to not mention any pending cases, but I mean, even right now we have a pending case related to resource planning for the utility, and those very things, I mean, state policy objectives related to carbon emission reductions are being discussed, and those are considerations in the planning process that the commission takes into account. So, but we don't have as comprehensive a framework to look at those factors when it comes to other types of utility service.
Thank you both for that. And, I would just like to commend the commission. Thank you for highlighting the fact that you've incorporated as a metric and a key operational aspect of your agency. I also applauded the Department of Transportation for doing the same. And I am asking, any agency that was involved in the climate initiative process, what they've been doing to continue to incorporate that internally. So thanks for sharing that information with us and some of that additional perspective. I know that a lot of the frameworks that the commission works off of are determined by us at the legislature. So that's going to be some continuing conversations that we'll be having here. But the background that you provided is very informative in that regard. With that, are there any other questions for the commission? All right, hearing none, thank you again for your presentation today. And for our final presentation today, we'll move on to the Nevada Transportation Association Authority and the Department of Business and Industry. You can begin your presentation whenever you're ready.
Okay, I just got it here, so I don't know what to do now.
You can either ask for their help or you can go to you have to get.
Ms. Gibbons, this is Judy in broadcast. We can see your presentation and we can hear you. Can you advance your presentation now?
I think I have one more. Oh. Is that okay?
That looks good. If you'd like to take it back to the first slide to begin.
Okay.
And it's great. Thank you.
And thank you, Madam Chair Marino and Vice Chair Watts, distinguished members of the committee. For the record, I'm Dawn Gibbons, and I'm in the office of the NTA in Reno. As a commissioner and chair, I will be sharing a presentation with you today on the Nevada Transportation Authority. And joining me today is Commissioner Newton and Deputy Commissioner DeRose. Well, I hope that she's gotten on. And I want to give you a little background on the people that work at the NTA, and then I'll proceed with the presentation. Commissioner Newton has been with NTA for many years, first as the Deputy Attorney General, and then as the Administrative Attorney. And for the past 3 years, he's been a commissioner. Commissioner Assad has been with NTA for 8.5 years. He was a municipal court judge in Las Vegas prior to joining the NTA. Both commissioners are attorneys, and we're very fortunate to have them at the NTA. Deputy Commissioner DeRose was previously with the Taxi Cab Authority and has now been with NTA for nearly 4 years. I come from the private sector. My background is business. And with hard work and a lot of luck, I did have 5 very successful businesses coming to Reno, especially since I came here in 1974 with just a couple $100. Like you, I had the opportunity to serve as a legislator, and I was a former First Lady of Nevada. I'm telling you all this because I want you to know that we have a very strong team that works very hard, and they're very qualified in their respective positions, and they have a wealth of knowledge. The NTA commissioners are hearing officers. They preside over their own cases as they have separate hearings from the other 2 commissioners. And every 5 to 6 weeks, we have a general session, normally with 100+ cases. That means that each of the 3 commissioners must not only know their own cases, but also have to be well informed on the other 2 commissioners' cases. We have a chief of enforcement, which is a very tough position. He oversees 12 investigators, 9 in Las Vegas and 3 in Reno. So it's 110,000 square feet of Nevada encompassing. Being out in the field can be very dangerous, especially when you have rogue or gypsy drivers that are not certificated. Also, there's a problem sometimes when TNCs go off the app and pick up cash riders. It's not only illegal, it's unfair to the state coffers and the companies they're working for. But most importantly, once the driver goes off the app, they are no longer insured by the TNC companies. And if there's an accident, then the passengers are not insured. And we have other people, Chief Revens, who does the compliance, does a very good job. And I want to mention Application Manager Liz Babcock when we get to one of the slides. These are the statutes that we govern, and I'm sure that you're probably familiar with these. We've been around a long time. The NTA has been a long-standing agency. We're a regulatory division of the business and industry. We're a division of them, and I'll let you read that because I don't want to take up all your time, and we're going to get to this in a little bit in a minute. These are some of the members of our staff, and I just like to put some pictures of them. I can't put them, all the enforcement people because we don't want them to be recognized, but we have a really positive staff that believes in making sure everybody that uses transportation are safe. And just some of the work we did, we've processed 2,687 driver permit applications in 2020 and 129 new expanded service and tariff applications in 2020. We conduct administrative and enforcement hearings. We have 3 commissioners who adjudicated and issued final decisions on 786 cases in 2020. And that's pretty good considering how 2020 was. We perform operational vehicle inspections on new and existing carriers. We enforce Nevada laws and regulations within NTA's jurisdiction. And we ensure the industry is providing the safest transportation of passengers and property. We also coordinate with federal, state, and local agencies to promote transportation safety needs for passenger transportation, such as the TNCs, taxis, limousines, charter buses, autonomous vehicles, and there are 9 other carriers companies that we regulate. We assist lawmakers in the executive branch to assess regulatory, statutory, and staffing needs. We have procedures for fair and equitable regulatory environment. We adopt the Nevada Administrative Code for a rapidly evolving transportation industry, and we improve agency efficiencies and services. And that's kind of important. And I don't think that my deputy commissioner is online. She was having trouble getting on, but she's been very good at making the NTA more efficient, and she's done a lot. When I first came in, we had all these just couldn't hardly even move in there with all these office where they kept paper. And so I didn't feel like I was in the 21st century at that point, but she's made great strides in helping us advance and keep efficient. These are some of the motor carriers that we have, the 706 motor carriers, and we're pretty proud of those. We also have a new entrepreneurial type guy, and he's using all Teslas in his fleets. I'll go over the 706 motor carriers, 14 tour companies. We have 7 of the non-emergency medical transfer companies that really came in, and it was very important this past year, and they had to spend a lot of money redoing their vehicles to make sure that those people that had COVID, they were safe, that the driver was safe, and the first responders were safe. We have 15 employer van pool companies and 21 warehouse permits. We have 81 non-consent and consent towing companies, 36 charter limousine companies, and we have 7 taxi cab companies outside of the Clark County. We have 8 contract carriers, 38 household good movers, 19 airport transfer service companies, 77 consent-only tow carriers, 64 charter buses, 23 special service carriers, and that total number of certificated carriers is 447. And the drivers, total number is 5,653. I'm just giving you, little. We went from Uber and Lyft to we have 5 now transportation network companies, Uber, Lyft, and Tango. They deliver passengers, hop, skip, and drive. They take kids back and forth from school and to their football and baseball games and different things. And URZ, they help disabled kids and adults. This again is the network companies. Unfortunately, TNC, active TNC drivers, the latest number was 14,215. And when before the pandemic started, we were having 40,000 plus active TNC drivers. So you can see we've been hit pretty hard. Financial commitment to the state revenue from both Uber and Lyft equals $2.2 million per year. And NRS 706B is autonomous vehicles. Right now, the vehicles are being tested through the DMV, but we have the administrative regulations, and we're ready for them whenever they can prove that they're safe, and we can prove they're safe. Revenue sources and expenditures. Our total revenue is $6,781,000. Nevada Highway Fund is $2,689,000. The TNC revenue, including reserve, is $3,632,000. NRS 706 revenue is $460,000. So we divided it up under Highway Fund TNC revenue is the biggest part of our budget, then Highway Fund, then 706. And here's for the next year is pretty much the same. And these are our expenditures. Personnel service is our largest expenditure. And then we have the cost of the Attorney General for legal investigative services, and business and industry. The $216,000 is for fiscal services. The transportation network companies is operating expenses for them. And then we have operating, that's 134. And pretty much the same in 2023. That is the end of our presentation. And I just want to let you know that I'm available to answer questions. The person probably best is Dave Newton. He's been there the longest. And so whoever you want to talk to, we're fine. Any questions?
Thank you so much for the overview of Nevada Transportation Authority. Members, I know we're a little short on time today because we have other meetings starting pretty soon, but does anyone have any questions?
Oops.
You might get off extremely easy today, Ms.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, they can call us. We're very available. And I think, I've talked to you many times, and you really know so much about what we do because of your background. And I appreciate all of you. And I want to thank you for being a state employee. I was in the private sector. I never got, insurance. I never got to have Christmas or New Year's Day or Thanksgiving or Martin Luther King, any of those days. And I just want you to know how much I appreciate and the NTA appreciates you for taking care of us state employees, because you do a very good job.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. We don't hear that often, so we appreciate that.
Yeah.
And we thank you for the work that you are doing and your staff.
All right. Thank you so much.
So you all have a wonderful day. And if we do have any questions, members will reach out to you individually or our committee staff.
Okay. No problem. And thank you very much.
Awesome. Okay, members, that brings us to the last item on our agenda, and that will be public comment. At this time, for anyone watching our committee meeting, on our webpage for today's meeting on Nellis, there's located, you'll find the buttons to allow you to submit your opinions online or participate in writing by telephone. And I will ask BPS if we have anyone in the waiting room for public comment.
Chair, we do have one person in the waiting room for public comment. I'll be queuing them up right now. With the caller with the last three digits 304, please press *6 to unmute. You will have 3 minutes, and you may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair Monroe Marino and members of the Assembly Growth and Infrastructure. For the record, my name is Laura Abram. I'm the Director of Project Execution and Public Affairs with First Solar, and thanks so much for the opportunity to speak with you today. First Solar is an American solar manufacturer and the largest U.S. provider of thin film PV panels. We have extensive experience and a proven track record developing, constructing, and operating the world's largest solar plants, including over 2.3 gigawatts of projects in development and operation right here in Nevada. First Solar has 500 megawatts of solar PV projects that have applied for the Renewable Energy Tax Abatement Program, with each project contributing millions in sales and property tax revenues for state and local governments and creating hundreds of jobs. We really want to acknowledge Director Bobzian and his office for their continued support and collaboration. The Governor's Office of Energy's excellent tax abatement program enabled the construction operation of these projects. And without this program, they would not be economically viable. Through the years, we've seen successful continuous improvement implemented in the program, and we really applaud the increased efficiencies and ease of processing the office has instituted, demonstrating, just how effective GOE is with limited resources. And in the past decade, Nevada has seen tremendous growth of renewable energy development with currently over 2 gigawatts of projects in operation, thanks in no small part to GOE's leadership, supportive energy policies in the state, and the tax abatement program. We're really thankful for this support and look forward to continuing to collaborate with the GOE and the state's leadership to meet the growing demand for renewables driven by the 50% renewable portfolio standard and 100% carbon-free goal by 2050. Thank you so much for this time to speak with you today.
Thank you for joining us today. Do we have any other callers in the queue?
Chair, the public comment line is open and working. However, there are no more callers in the queue.
Thank you so much. So members, that will conclude our meeting for today. Thank you to our presenters, the committee, our broadcast staff, and the members of the public who have virtually joined us here today. Our next meeting for the Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure will be Tuesday, February 16th at 1:30. We will have several presentations from agencies involved in Nevada's highway safety and energy sectors. And with that, this meeting is adjourned, and I wish you all a great day.